Today we have something very special on Novus TV, an intimate and interactive discussion with a man who is literally a living legend. He's penned over 40 books. His latest one, called Letters to My Grandchildren, was just released. Today we sit down with environmentalist, academic, geneticist, science broadcaster, and one of the greatest Canadians of all time, Mr. David Suzuki. David Suzuki, an absolute pleasure.
Good to be here.
Thanks so much for taking the time to chat with us today. Okay, so you have an incredible career, written over 40 books. Why this book, Letters to My Grandchildren, right now?
Well, you know, my grandparents came to Canada from Japan between 1902 and 1906. They lived here all their lives, but they never learned to speak English. My mom and dad were both born and raised in Canada. After World War II, they said to us, listen, you're Canadians, you speak English. If you want to learn the second language, you speak French. So I never learned Japanese. And when my last grandparent died, I realized, oh my goodness, I've got all these questions I wanted to ask. Like, why did you come here? What was it like? What was the voyage like? What was it like when you came to a racist country? How difficult was it? What did you like about it? Why did you stay? You know, do you regret it? All those questions that are a part of who I am will never be answered. And now that I'm an elder, and you know, at my age, I could drop dead tomorrow. And I just didn't want my grandchildren to suddenly say to their parents, gee, I wish I'd asked Grandpa about blah, blah, blah. And so that was my effort to cover some of the important things in my life, so that if they're really wondering, you know, how the hell did Dad or Grandpa get into television, or why was he involved in environmentalism, he can find some of that there.
Nice. And it was written in a very intimate style.
Well, it's written directly to them. And so, you know, the question is, why the hell would I ask someone else to buy a book that I wrote for my grandchildren? But I hope as people read that there will be things that will resonate, and they'll go, yeah, I'd like to tell my grandchildren that, or, you know, oh, that makes me think of something else, that it will become personal in the things that it triggers in the reader.
And in the way that you approached it, I mean, obviously your grandchildren were top of mind, but was the plan to just kind of maybe write some personal memoirs to them, and then you thought, well, maybe I'll just let the whole world in on this as well?
No, it started as an idea for a book. And I thought this would be a great book to share with the world, but really it is my self-indulgence in that it's for my grandchildren. And I'm very pleased with it.
Well, so am I. I have to admit, I didn't get to read all of it. We don't have a lot of time to read these days, but I did.
That's the trouble with you young journalists now. You don't have time.
I wish we did. I wish we did. I read probably about the first third and the last chapter. There was some really rich content that I had no idea about, so I was really intrigued for the chapters I did get a chance to read. Earlier you mentioned racism. Could you talk a little bit about the conundrum that you faced as a Canadian who looked Japanese during World War II here in BC?
Well, try to imagine what it was for my parents. My dad was born in Vancouver in 1909, my mother in 1911. They grew up, English was their language, although they were fluently bilingual, they spoke English. And they grew up, went to high school, and considered themselves fully Canadian. World War II happens, and suddenly all of the rights and privileges of being a Canadian out the window. You are an enemy alien, and we're taking your property, confiscating your money, and you get the hell out of Vancouver and go to these camps for 3 years. At the end of that 3 years, Japanese Canadians in the camps were given two choices. Go east of the Rockies, or renounce your citizenship and a one-way ticket to Japan. To my mom and dad, Japan was the enemy. Mm-hmm. Japan was a foreign country, never been there. So we chose to stay and were booted out of the province. So imagine now, they were in their 30s, their very early 30s. They had come through the Depression, and then to have this hit, I think it was a staggering blow to their idealism, their belief in Canada as a country. Now, of course, their parents had already encountered a tremendous amount of racism. I mean, this is a country that was built on subjugation of the original peoples here. And so I feel that it's in the DNA of Canada is racism. Racism to the First Peoples, but then to the Chinese and Japanese Canadians and Jews and Muslims, and all of that's built in there. And so for them, for my father, I think it really broke his back in the sense of really having a faith in the country. But he wanted me, he kept drumming in my head that you've got to work 10 times harder than any white person to succeed. And he just drummed in my head that I had to show Canadians that they made a mistake.
Decades and decades later, just these habits or these lessons that we learn as
People
children
ask
stay
me,
with us.
what were the things that formed you? And I say Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor was it. Until Pearl Harbor, I was just this young, happy-go-lucky kid starting kindergarten and loved Canada. I would have never thought of myself as being Japanese. I was just a Canadian. But Pearl Harbor changed everything. And I don't think now, but up until very recently, if I walked in a room with white people, my own head said, I'll bet you they see a Jap there when I walk in. So these are tracks that are laid down, you know, when you're very young. So that has casts a long shadow. I never asked a white girl out for a date until, well, I guess it was in college the first time, but terrified of asking a white girl out. And these are all things, yeah, thank God that ended at some point, but anyway.
In the book, you mention your grandson Tamo was arrested on Burnaby Mountain for protesting Kinder Morgan. What are your thoughts on both the Kinder Morgan and the Northern Gateway Pipeline? And do you actually think these projects will go through?
I have no idea. I hope they won't. But I certainly think that our political leaders and our corporations are not listening to the public will. I mean, when you get the mayor of one of the large cities, Burnaby, who says, I'm going to jail to try to stop this. I'm willing to go to jail. That's pretty serious. I mean, this is a man elected by the majority or of the population here, and when their representatives are saying they're going to go to jail, I think we ought to listen to that. I think the Northern Gateway will not go through, and that is simply because the coastal First Nations are adamant, and unfortunately in their opposition, we're not hearing the real message. I know every one of those communities along the coast. I've visited them, my wife has visited them. They're desperate for economic development. They're desperate for jobs. And they plead with us, you know, help us develop jobs. You can bet they've been offered tens of millions of dollars from the government and companies to put the pipeline through. And yet they're objecting to it. What is that telling us? Some things are more important than money. That's the message. And we're not getting it. We think, oh, those damned Indians, they just want more money. No! They see that their culture is at risk, and they're not willing to tolerate that. And that's the reason why I think the pipelines will never go through, because the coastal First Nations understand the threat of putting bitumen on the West Coast.
Well, there you have it. Some passion and wisdom from one of the brightest minds on the planet. His brand new book, Letters to My Grandchildren, is out now. Thank you so much to David and the David Suzuki Foundation for what was a riveting experience. And for City Lights and Novus TV, I'm Jordan Wade.